Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Reports, the pollster who didn't immediately go back to sleep and hibernate till the next election. That's right, the very day after the election, we were back into the field with another set of questions, and we will poll every night between now and November 2028 because something incredible is playing out right now. The battle for the future of the Democrat Party, or to be more specific, perhaps the identity crisis, because right now, what it looks like, just before the election, we were talking about a future where potentially we could have more freedom or more authoritarianism. And now our future looks like economic populism versus an eat the rich revolution. And we have some numbers today that really spell it out. But before we do that, you just have to go to Twitter and marvel at the new paradigm. The establishment just stuck its head out of the trench and it got blasted off because Twitter is lit right now. Anybody who's been online knows that it's just like it was right at the end of October. Every single person is on there dunking on establishment Republicans who, once again, all they needed to do was listen, they own Congress. All they needed to do was pass a clean CR to extend the debt ceiling. And instead, again, the Democrats, just like they always do, get exactly what they wanted 1,500 pages of pork. And people started reading it today. Vivek came out there. Listen, it was absolutely ugly. Look at this horrifying ratio 33,000 comments on Speaker Mike Johnson's most recent post. And every single one of these things, yeah, I wrote one page. Look at cat turd. This is the same exact BS language Democrats use to pass ridiculous bills that suck like this one. If you want to fund disaster relief, you're the Speaker of the House. Put it in a separate bill and pass it. Stop lying. Yes, this is exactly right. You're in power. Govern like it. And let's just go to trending. The number one trending thing, Congress and Elon Musk, who's talking about Congress, and shut it down and vote no. I mean, like, this is what people on Twitter are talking about. This is the new paradigm. Hundreds of thousands of tweets and comments. I'm pretty sure just a few years ago, Jack Dorsey would have kicked these things off of trending, but now the establishment can't run from their bad decisions. And if you want to hear more about polling on this topic, our most recent video didn't get a ton of likes. Maybe it's because it was pretty heavy stuff, but one of the things we went into is how Americans actually don't really mind the government being shut down. In fact, 9 in 10 US voters say that the last government shutdown back during Trump's term had little or no effect on them on their daily personal lives. So it doesn't really matter to them. And not only that, a majority of voters supported shutting down the government if it got them something they wanted, like in this case, reduced spending, or like the law preventing illegal aliens from voting in our elections. But today's video, like I talked about, is the future of the left. And in my opinion, the discussion is revolving around this guy. If you've been living under a rock, this is Luigi Mangione, the man currently in custody, accused of killing Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. And it's creating a really crazy dialogue. Basically, this guy had a history of health issues. I think he had some back problems, some surgery. I don't know if insurance and his inability to get some of it covered played a role, but it's reasonable to expect that coverage was part of his motivation since 3 bullet shells collected at the scene said deny, defend, depose. Apparently, 3 words that describe the strategy with which these insurance companies use to minimize the amount of payouts. But here's what we polled on, and it's really horrifying. Really, really disgusting. This is one of the worst findings I think we've ever had. 27% view the CEO's murder as understandable. And let's get right to the crosstabs. The chief executive officer for a major health insurance company was recently murdered in New York City. Which is closer to your feeling? The murder of the health insurance executive was a cowardly act of terrorism, or it was an understandable reaction to the high cost of healthcare in America. People are pretty spun up about the cost of healthcare, and we'll look at some polling that supports that. But the top line here is that 6 in 10 voters say that it was a cowardly act of terrorism. Now, the bar here is kind of high. It's a really stark response. Cowardly act of terrorism, not murder. This is somebody described it as this. In fact, I'm pretty sure one of the laws he was charged under is some form of terrorism law. But 27% of US likely voters, slightly more than 1 in 4. Like, you walk down the street, you see 4 people, one of them thinks that the CEO's murder was an understandable reaction to the high cost of healthcare in America. I've been talking about the public insanity issue that we've had. I've been talking about the increasing divisiveness in our political discourse, the way in which the news that people watch and consume is being weaponized to turn Americans against each other, about how the risk of civil war in America is higher than it's ever been as measured by our polling. 43% of Americans think it's at least somewhat likely there will be a civil war in the next few years. According to Republicans, the number one enemy that America currently faces is Democrats. According to Democrats, the number one enemy is Republicans. And now 27% of American likely voters think a murder, a killing, a planned, calculated killing is an understandable reaction to the high cost of healthcare in America. Now, we're going to get into age and gender, but there's really not much of a gender signal. 63% of men and 59% of women think that it was a cowardly act of terrorism. And 26 and 27% say it was understandable. But look at the age signal. Only 46% of voters under 40 think that it was a cowardly act of terrorism, less than half. Now, there is a 16% not sure number, but 38%, almost 4 in 10 young voters, think that this was an understandable reaction to the high cost of healthcare in America. Something is going on here. It's not because all of these 18 to 39-year-olds are chronically ill. It's most likely because a lot of these 18 to 39-year-olds are financially struggling. And so a lot of people in the news, a lot of people in politics will say things like the number one issue on voters' minds is the economy. And that's kind of a very sterile way to describe it. It doesn't really capture the extent to which Americans are upset, especially young Americans. Less than 4 in 10 18 to 39-year-olds think today's children will be better off than their parents. There is very little optimism out there. They feel like their future has been stolen from them. And so when you just say, oh, it's the economy, it's really easy to say, oh, well, people are kind of inflamed about abortion as well. This is something totally different here. 38% of 18 to 39-year-olds think a murder was an understandable reaction. Now, we don't normally do this, and this is a smaller subsample, so it's going to be less statistically relevant. But I filtered for just 18 to 29-year-olds, and then I split them up by gender. And men under 30, 54% of them say that it was a cowardly act of terrorism. Only 1 in 3 say it was an understandable reaction. But look at the women. A plurality of them actually think it was an understandable reaction to the high cost of healthcare in America. And this just absolutely blows my mind. This is pure radicalization. Only 40% of them say it was a cowardly act of terrorism. And I really don't get this. I would have expected more empathy. You know, a lot of these women are ostensibly building families and having children. This is dark. So this line here is I subtracted the top number from the bottom number. And so a negative number here is, let's just call it the evil signal. And the higher the number here, the more likely you are to call the murder for what it is. And look at that, 65 and older voters. There's something about the boomers by a 7-1 margin that they say that this was a cowardly act of terrorism and not an understandable reaction. Very few of them, only 11%. But then here's what we were just talking about. And the 18 to 29-year-old women, woof, underwater, 5 points. In fact, I think if we looked at all the demographics, we're really not going to see any other negatives. Maybe self-ID'd liberals. Look at the race signal, though. This is crazy, too. White voters say it was a cowardly act of terrorism more than anybody else. Comparably, this is a 40-point margin here. Everybody else is under 30. That is wild. I wonder what that means. Here is the party numbers. And Democrats, by a majority, do say it was a cowardly act of terrorism, 52%. Only 34% say it was an understandable reaction. But that number is only 21% for Republicans and 25% for independents. So, not a huge signal, but a meaningful one, because terrorism wins over understandable by a 50-point margin among Republicans, but only by an 18-point margin among Democrats. Look, there's self ID'd liberals. They're underwater 5 points as well. And what's not much of an income signal, really not much of an education signal either. What's weird is that the bookends here, people with lower incomes and lower educations, and conversely, with higher incomes and higher educations, seem to give the more principled response. And it's the same thing with Biden approval. Anyways, what a fascinating question. How likely is it that the recent murder in New York City will inspire copycats who target other business executives? And only 25% say very likely, but a combined total of 67%, 2/3 of all likely voters, say it's at least somewhat likely, and not really a gender or age signal, not much of a racial signal. Democrats say likely 68%, but it's exactly 68% for Republicans too. Democrats are just a little bit more likely to say very likely. We've spent a lot of time over the last 4 years polling about healthcare, but it was almost entirely framed from a COVID perspective. And the issues that really bubbled to the top were the economy, things like things like energy policy and grocery prices, and the border, because we do have an illegal invasion at our southern border that Americans were absolutely inflamed about. But believe it or not, before COVID, health insurance was a really important topic. People were still kind of upset about Obamacare, and people wanted it repealed, and they didn't get it. They trusted the Republicans to repeal Obamacare, and the Republicans let them down. But here are numbers from the middle of 2019. How would you rate the US healthcare system? And only 8% say excellent, though 25% say good. So only 1 in 3 US likely voters says excellent or good. That 8% number is really low. This is almost in Congress territory, but I'm pretty sure this number here would be in the low teens. This good number would be in the low teens for Congress, giving Congress somewhere in the 20s for an excellent or good. And the poor number, while high, 32%, isn't astronomical. 40% of voters, just to give you a benchmark, said that Kamala Harris did a poor job as the border czar. But what's important to note here is that, again, it's the 18 to 39-year-olds and also women who are more likely to say that it is poor. 42% of 18 to 39-year-olds and 35% of women. It's only 29% of men. And actually, Democrats are much more likely to say poor. 41%, another 33% say fair. So 74% of Democrats say fair or poor, while it's only 51% of Republicans. That's really wild considering they got Obamacare. Really wild. And another contextual question in terms of reforming healthcare, which is more important, reducing the cost of healthcare, 54%, or making sure that everyone has healthcare, 39%. Now, I can tell you, we've asked this question a bunch of times over the years, and the numbers really haven't changed. It's easy to imagine the cost of healthcare skyrocketing, but the cost of everything has been skyrocketing, to be honest with you. And the fact that reducing cost is most important for everybody kind of clashes with the message that the Democrats are going right now, which is that, listen, insurance has gotten so bad that they need to assassinate health executives. It's kind of wild, to the point where I guess this is going to be a histrionic call for nationalizing the healthcare system. I guess that's what they're going to run on. And I don't know. We'll have to see what 4 years of RFK Jr., 4 years of the Trump administration does. I think it's kind of silly, personally, to nationalize a system that's already broken. Because tell me one thing the government has fixed. Let's fix healthcare first before we even talk about nationalizing it, because right now there's not enough money in the world to run the system with the government. But yeah, the 18 to 39-year-olds are more likely to say that making sure everyone has healthcare is more important, but that still loses to reducing the cost of healthcare 53% to 41%. White voters, really, it's really only black voters who say that making sure everyone has healthcare is more important, 54% of them. But 40% of them still say they need to reduce the cost of healthcare. And Democrats, reducing the cost of healthcare is only 36%. 60% of them say making sure everyone has more healthcare is more important. And independents basically poll like Republicans 2-1, saying the issue is reducing cost. And look, here are some more numbers. Like, this is a reason right now to follow Rasmussen reports. I literally just went to our website, searched health insurance, and pulled these numbers up. You're not going to get analysis like this. Like, very few people in the industry are continuously polling on things like this, who have 20 years of historical data to pull from, who can draw these trend lines and tell you where public opinion is going. What is the biggest problem with the healthcare in America today from 2021? 58% say cost, only 13% say availability, only 14% say quality of care, 11% say something else. And cost wins with everybody, although 18 to 39-year-olds say availability 3 times more than middle-aged voters, 22% to 7%. And black voters say availability more than anyone else too, 28%, but 41% of them still say cost. Healthcare is too expensive in this country. The healthcare that Luigi Mangione, whatever his name is, was able to get. He got his surgery. Even liberals, 65% of liberals say cost. Only 10%. Listen, this tells you there is not a lot of principles there, because a real liberal would probably want to make sure everybody has care. But for them, 65% of it is cost. 65% of them say cost. Well, what reduces cost? Competition. These are some real free market liberals here. Really wild. Which would do more to reduce healthcare costs? More free market competition or more government regulation? And the free market wins 62% to 28%, wins with men and women about the same. Free market wins among 18 to 39-year-olds, 55 to 35, 20 points, although not as much as older voters. Free market wins with black voters, even 52% to 38%. And Republicans at 78 to 14. Democrats, it's close, 45% to 44%, but a plurality of Democrats think that free market competition is the answer here. This is, again, right? Obama came in and did this massive government project, Obamacare. And yet, Democrats, like half of them, Democrats think the solution here is more free market competition. This is when, like, listen, all of their talking heads want to push nationalized healthcare, I'm sure. And that's why the Democrat Party's out of touch. They don't understand what their voters want. And liberals, 28% of them do say free market, 59% say government regulation, whatever. And there are other clues that, this problem is getting worse. And I don't think we've heard the end of the issue of healthcare. I think everybody has been focused on COVID and accountability, but there is a problem here. This is going to rear its ugly head again. Look at this. Searches for denied claims over the last 20 years. Wasn't really a thing like 10, 15, 20 years ago, but look at the way it's been inexorably increasing over time. Now, you got a spike here at the beginning of COVID. You got a massive spike now, probably has something to do with the killing, but just look at this trend. Absolutely crazy. So here are the implications. You may not know Taylor Lorenz, and if that describes you, then I envy you. But she's, 40, 50, 60, whatever, I don't know, year-old technology reporter. She worked for the Washington Post. Now I think she's unemployed. And it's because she has horrible takes like this. Why we want insurance executives dead. No, that does not mean people should murder them. Well, I'm glad she qualified the statement. But if you've watched a loved one suffer and die from insurance denial, it's normal to wish the people responsible would suffer the same fate. No, it's not. In fact, America was built on Judeo Christian values. It is patently unchristian to wish anybody at all to suffer any fate. What about turning the other cheek? This is horrifying and evil. And she goes on to describe, listen, I'm not going to humor this woman, but she's getting a lot of attention. She's been on a lot of TV shows. She got a lot of oxygen. Piers Morgan had her on to try and explain this. And she didn't back down. She's like going all in. She said that she felt joy after seeing that this guy who really, I mean, he just worked there. He just ran the company. I don't think any of his specific policies exacerbated any of the problems here. He was just a scapegoat for the left. But here's the problem with Taylor Lorenz, is that she is really tied in to young female internet culture. She does have a pretty good ability to read the room and play in to maintain her relevance. And so the reason why I think this is a problem is that this kind of sentiment is being echoed by people like our dear friend, the bartender in Congress. AOC sympathizes with those celebrating UnitedHealthcare CEO's murder and says denied claims are acts of violence. Well, I guess it makes sense. If people think words are violence, then they probably think denied claims are violence too. In fact, basically anything that hurts their feelings is probably violence. Representative Cortez sparked controversy Thursday with her remarks on the fatal shooting of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson, when she suggested that those shocked by people's lack of sympathy towards the slain CEO simply don't understand Americans' frustration with the healthcare system. Isn't it weird? Like, nobody was talking about healthcare a month and a half ago. What a pivot. And there's definitely a reason. Like, I don't know why they fixated on this, probably because of the killing. Now, if it bleeds, it leads. This is going to be the bone the dog picks up. This is going to be the pointy end of the 2028 push, the pointy end of the spear. The issue of the day that they build their new coalition around. This is not to say that an act of violence is justified, but I think for anyone who is confused or shocked or appalled, they need to understand that people interpret and feel and experience denied claims as an act of violence against them. Cortez maintained that systemic inequality is the real problem. Healthcare in this country has gotten to such a depraved state that people are living with things they should never have to live with. And this is not to say, and this is not to participate in that glorification, but we need to understand that extreme levels of inequality in the United States yield high degrees of social instability. Well, I'm pretty sure the reason that healthcare costs are ballooning is because more treatments are available to people than ever before. High-tech treatments, all kinds of drugs that didn't exist because we're constantly spending billions of dollars in R&D. And you know what? I don't see anybody actually quoting any statistics about coverage. I thought the whole point of Obamacare was to do away with the whole idea that there are Americans in the United States who aren't covered. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. And their solutions sound ridiculous. But here's the problem, is that she's being talked about as a really strong hopeful for 2028 for the Democrats. President AOC, Democrats need star power to win in 2028. They need a riveting messenger, whether that's a rising political star or a charismatic outsider. Paging Mark Cuban. Yeah, Mark Cuban, charismatic. Good luck with that. Could help the party break through in an increasingly fragmented media environment. It is a fragmented media environment, but what's weird is that, in my opinion, there is now an ecosystem focused on rational thought, on an objective exchange of information, on mutual good faith discussion about the reality that surrounds us. The problem is that for many on the left, they're allergic to that. And they've gone and sodded off into their liberal echo chamber, replete with furries, blue sky. But yeah, look at the treatment she's getting in Vanity Fair. I'm pretty sure this is still an important rag on the left. And if you look at the list of people that are being floated, I it doesn't look good for them. It's not a good bench when your best people are like Shapiro or Pritzker. The normal names Newsom, Whitmer get tossed around. It seems like there's going to be people vying for the top of the Democrat Party from, I guess you could say, three different camps. You have the establishment camp, the camp that's been in power in DC, the offshoots of like the Pelosi folks, the Biden folks, Kamala Harris, that locus of power. Then you have people from the Eat the Rich left, the Bernie Bros, AOC, and it looks like they're making their move right now. It looks like they are forcing themselves to the front of the discussion to seize the reins of the movement and drive it in a very different direction. Because yesterday's establishment Democrats were all just about maintaining the status quo. And the idea of like massively rejiggering the entire healthcare industry based on the concept of expanding access is something very new and different. And it's something that I suspect that the establishment left, powered often by pharmaceutical advertisements, among other things, is not going to want to put up with it. But I really wonder if they still have the power to fend off these attacks. I really wonder how it's going to play out. And then you have a whole other group of people like Amy Klobuchar, who are trying to signal that they're willing to fight the Democrat establishment. People, she came out and spoke ill about Joe Biden's pardon of his son Hunter. And I also wonder, what is their plan? And to be honest with you, that direction is probably better for the country. It's probably better if the Democrat Party wrung control from the hands of the accelerationists, of the people, of the kleptocrats, and brought it back in a more moderate direction that served the people. They would be really competitive with the right, in my opinion. But it appears that the way everything is structured right now means that they're allergic to the type of introspection required to regroup and change directions. But ultimately, my biggest issue is the way in which a huge portion of people in this country, almost 30% of them, are absolutely insane and willing to embrace the murder of an innocent man in order, like, that's revolution stuff. That's revolution stuff. Those are people who are totally willing and capable to violently overthrow the country in a way that they go to bed at night, every night, dreaming that the MAGA people did on January 6th. And ultimately, it makes me think about this quote: "You can love it or you can hate it, but this was one of our founding fathers. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And I think that's a really profound statement. And if you disagree with it, I would ask you this: what other reason does any elected representative have to go to DC and put your needs above theirs? That's their job. They're supposed to be representing you. Where is that selflessness going to come from, if not from a moral and religious culture? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic. So if you watch this and you want to opine, you can leave a comment on YouTube. I'm probably not going to see it, but you can also go to Twitter at Mark_R_Mitchell and join in the replies there. I'd really like to hear your reaction to the absolutely horrifying headline number in this video. If you like the video, make sure you like it on YouTube or Rumble. Subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps us grow and get our information out to more people. I really think we're a voice of sanity in an absolutely wild and insane world right now, and more attention needs to be shined on the absolute depravity, the lengths to which people in power will go to maintain power, and it's actually really sick. So if you learned something, if you liked the video, go to rasmussenreports.com. We would love to have you as a subscriber to help support us. It's really cheap and we appreciate it. And thanks for watching.